A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus went into the region of Caesarea Philippi, and he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter said in reply, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus said to him in reply, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my heavenly Father. So I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Then he strictly ordered his disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Bible trivia question. Start the homily today. What is the third book of the Bible called? Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus. All right. What's the fourth book of the Bible? Numbers. And the fifth book? Deuteronomy. Right. The Pentateuch. Right. The first 5 books of the Bible that were written by Moses, or at least as the primary author. We should all be able to remember what the first 5 books of the Bible are: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And we talked a couple weeks ago about how Leviticus and Deuteronomy are not exactly the most interesting books of the Bible to read because there's not really stories, right? So Leviticus, for example, it's the book for the Old Testament priests. Right? It's full of the rituals and rules and regulations for the Old Covenant liturgy. And so it's the book of Leviticus. So it's not really meant to be read from cover to cover, just like the red Roman Missal on the altar. Right? It's not meant to be read cover to cover. It's for the liturgy. And so if you ever reading the Bible, right, Leviticus is not really a great book to read. It's more like a book to be studied. Right? Kind of more like a reference book, right, about the liturgies. And we talked about how Deuteronomy was basically the last sermon that Moses ever gave to the people of Israel. So he knew that he was not going to be able to enter the promised land, and the people were going to enter without him. Led by which man? Joshua. Very good. All right, we're picking this up. All right, Catholics, we're learning this, okay? All right, so before they were getting ready to enter the promised land, Moses gave his last sermon, where he basically recounted to the people where they had come from and how far they had come. And advice for when they would enter the promised land, for how they would need to be God's people. So again, it's a sermon, right? It's not a bunch of stories. That's why it's not as interesting to a lot of people. Now, in between the book of Leviticus and the book of Deuteronomy is the very exciting book of Numbers. The book of Numbers. The book of Numbers basically tells the story about the journey of the people of Israel from Mount Sinai to the promised land. So it expands over a number of years, and it tells the story of their journey. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about how when the people of Israel, when they started off on their journey, how we can learn a lot about what our church should be like. Right? We're reading about the Old Covenant church, and we talked about how when they were marching along, first of all, we talked about how they were always on the move. And so a church should always be on the move. We always have to try to avoid just becoming stagnant. And the same way we've always been. We always need to be trying to be on the move. We talked about how the people of Israel, when they were marching, they would form the sign of the cross with their camp. Man, that baby really loves numbers, right? Dang. That's awesome. I love the enthusiasm, right? So they would walk in the form of the cross. Right? They would have 3 tribes in the north, 3 in the south, 3 to the west, 3 in the east. And what was right in the center? The tabernacle. The tabernacle was right in the center. We talked about how every Catholic church, Christ should be in the very center. The tabernacle should be right in the center of the church, not off in some side room somewhere, right? It should be front and center. How Christ should be the center of all of our lives. We talked about how when they were marching, right, the tribe that would lead the march, it was called the tribe of Judah. Does anybody remember what Judah means in Hebrew? It means praise. So we talked about how the people of Israel, as they were journeying, they led with praise. How any successful church needs to lead first with praise. Too many churches lead with complaints and critiques, right? We need to be leading with praise. When people hear about St. Bernard, I hope that their impression of people is not, oh, those people hate their church, they're always complaining about it. Man, people are always praising about how much they love their church. It should be us leading with praise. Now, today in the book of Numbers, I want to talk about another very significant episode. You know, one of the things that oftentimes people don't understand about the Old Testament is we know a few things, right? Like we know the people of Israel, they were going to the Promised Land, which was the land of milk and honey, right? And how long did it take them to get there? 40 years. See, Catholics, you know the Bible, okay? Everybody says we don't know the Bible, right? We know certain things about it. Now, the people of Israel, they were wandering for 40 years. Why 40 years? That's the question. It doesn't take 40 years to get from Egypt to the Promised Land. The reason why it took them 40 years is because of the story we're going to talk about this morning. If you have your Bibles, you can open up to the book of Numbers. It's chapter 13 and 14. And we're going to read an excerpt from chapter 13. So basically, the people, they stayed at Mount Sinai for a year, and then they began journeying. And as they got to the edge of the Promised Land about a year later, Moses was commanded by God to send out 12 spies into the land. And God told Moses, he said, choose one man from every tribe to go and spy out the land and to see what it looks like and how fruitful it is and what the people are like in the land. Go and send out these men to investigate the land that I will give to you and to the people of Israel. And so the 12 spies went. And they were there for 40 days. And they had some really good news to report. When they came back, they said, man, the land is just full of all sorts of different fruits. They found fruits that were so large that it actually took multiple men to carry a cluster of grapes back to the people of Israel, right, who were awaiting the report. But the 12 spies, they also had bad news. They said that the people in the land were numerous and very trained in battle in all the cities. They were surrounded by fortified walls. And the people were huge in comparison to the people of Israel. They were exaggerating. They said, we felt like we were like grasshoppers in their sight. That's how big the people were. This was the report that came back to Moses and the congregation. It says in the book of Numbers, chapter 14, verses 27 and following, the spies came and they reported, they said, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Yet the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And in the midst of this conversation, Caleb, remember Caleb? Caleb and Joshua were the only two men who were allowed to enter the Promised Land, who had been liberated from Egypt. It's because of the story. Caleb stood up and he said, let us go up and take the land at once, for we are well able to overcome them. The other 10 spies said, we are not able to go up against the people. They are stronger than us. And they started grumbling against Moses. Are you following the story? The 12 spies were to go out and investigate the land that God promised he would give to them. And 10 of them, they came back and they doubted. There's no way we can ever take this land. We might as well just stay here and die in the wilderness. But 2 of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, they said that we should go up and take it. The Lord has promised us the land and he will give us victory. It was because of this, because of the doubt of these 10 spies, God actually punished the people of Israel. He said, for every day that you were in the land investigating, You will have to now remain in the desert for 1 year for each of those days. That's why they were in the desert for 40 years. And if you remember the rest of the story, eventually the people of Israel, they did end up conquering the promised land. Joshua and Caleb led the army, and they were victorious very easily. If only the people of Israel would have trusted in God's promise, they could have taken the promised land a lot sooner. They could have received the inheritance that God wanted to give to them. But they doubted. They focused on all the challenges and the problems instead of recognizing their resources. God was with them. How could they not be victorious? You know, I love this story about the 12 spies because I think it is so relevant in the church today. So many of us as modern day Catholics, we're used to being a part of parishes that are shrinking. And many of us, we just have the same attitude as the 10 spies did. You know, we might as well just give up now. There's no point in doing anything. The culture is becoming more secular. Young people aren't interested anymore, etc., etc., etc. Might as well just give up now. Do we really believe that if we are faithful to God, God does not want to see our church grow and expand and thrive? Do we really believe that? The reason why parishes are shrinking is not because God doesn't want our parishes to grow. It's because so many Catholics, we just live a defeatist attitude. You know, I heard the story of a church a couple years back. It was a Protestant church, and the pastor arrived to their parish, and there was literally 20 members in their church. And they were all people who were retired, right? Like there was no families, there was no young people, there was no plan for the future. And the pastor arrived at the church, and he convinced the people that they needed to start living with a mindset towards the future so that the church would survive. And he began slowly to change the mentality of the people in the church. And now that church is the biggest church in its town. Went from 20 members, all people who were retired, no young families or anything. That was the biggest church in the town. And some of you might be saying, well, you know, but that's not Crawfordsville. Well, actually, it is Crawfordsville. That's one of the Protestant churches here in Crawfordsville. That's their story, 20 years later. So my question to us is, why in the world can that not be us? They had 20 people. They didn't even have the glory and splendor of the Catholic faith. 2,000 years of a rich, beautiful history. Think about all the things that we have at St. Bernard. First of all, think about how many people we have at St. Bernard. We got something like 300, maybe 350 English families, right? Another probably 200 Hispanic families. We have 1,000 people in our parish. Can you think of any other organization in Crawfordsville that has 1,000 people? Think about what we can accomplish with 1,000 people who are all on the same page and have the same vision. Imagine what we could do. You know, at St. Bernard, I don't know if you guys realize this, we're actually the only church in Crawfordsville that actually has a weekly service at Wabash College. Think about the opportunity that we have as a parish that any other church in Crawfordsville would be dying to have. We have it. We have this huge influx in our community of Hispanics. 95% of them are Catholic. Think about the opportunity for growth in our parish. We have 1,000 people. Think about what we can do if we would just stop having a defeatist attitude and seeing the opportunities that are before us. You know, one of the reasons why that church in Crawfordsville has grown so much, it's, you know, part of it is because of their pastor, right? The pastor is obviously a very gifted leader. But the key, and I've actually talked to them about it, the key is that he makes every single person in the church recognize that they themselves are responsible for the growth of the church. It's not just the pastor. You know, don't we fall into that sometimes? It's Catholics, we think, well, maybe if the priest would just do this or that, or maybe if the bishop would just do this or that, or maybe if we could just have better music or a better youth ministry or whatever, right? We have all these opinions. But we aren't actually willing to do something ourselves. The people of Israel, they wanted to enter the promised land until they found out that they were going to have to fight to get it. It was going to take work to get it. All of a sudden they thought, well, maybe we'll just stay here in the wilderness. How many Catholics have that same mentality? Just think if every single Catholic made it their responsibility to grow the church. Imagine if every single member of our parish, for example, even just say like the next 5 years, if every single one of us could just bring one person to the church, we'd have 2,000 people. Parish would double in size. And it's not that hard. We just have to be committed to the mission. We have to be willing to take the time to train, to learn about the faith, so that we're ready to answer people's questions. We have to take the time to actually spend time with God in prayer. It's sad how few Catholics spend any time praying to God other than the 1 hour a week on Sunday and maybe like a minute before you go to bed at night. Imagine if the only exercise you did during the week was 1 minute a day. You wouldn't be in very good shape. You wouldn't be a great athlete. So how can we expect to be a good evangelist, somebody who can bring other people into the church, if we don't spend any time training, learning about the faith, or praying? And it's not that complicated. You don't need to be some sort of theologian. There's so many resources on the internet, right? How to defend the Catholic faith, how to answer basic questions about Catholicism. It's so easy to learn about the faith in our modern day and age. But do we take the time to do it? Do you take the time to take risks for God? The people of Israel, God was asking them to take a risk, to go and fight this intimidating people. They had to take a risk. The number one reason why people join any church is because somebody invited them. When was the last time you invited someone to be Catholic, to come to St. Bernard, to come to Mass? You don't have to be some sort of Bible-thumping person. It's as simple as just finding ways to bring up the faith in conversation, and maybe even ask your neighbors, coworkers, just out of curiosity, do you have a church? We really love our church. You can come with us sometime. It doesn't have to be awkward. But many of us think, well, I don't want to make it awkward, or what if they say no, Who cares? Take a risk. Are we really not willing to even wager that much for the faith? Then our parishes deserve to die. We deserve to be bored in our faith. If we're not willing to actually take the time to train and to seek opportunities to bring other people in. There are many odds against us, but God